Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time I'm going to look at the Linux Mint 19 operating system. Codenamed Tara, this was released at the end of June 2018 and is a Linux distro to which many Windows users may end up migrating. In this video, I'm therefore going to look at Linux Mint 19 from the perspective of a Windows user who's considering transitioning to Linux. So, here we are on the linuxmint.com website where we can get Linux Mint 19, and it's worth pointing out that Linux Mint 19 is a long-term support release, an LTS release, which means it has support for 5 years, which takes its support to 2023. So to get it, we will go to a download, and on the download page you will see there are 3 different versions of Linux Mint 19 available with different desktop environments: Cinnamon, Mate or XFCE. The most common is Cinnamon, that's the one I like to use, so we'll go for that. And most people should use the 64-bit version if you're running a modern computer. It's worth pointing out that the system requirements here are at least 1 GB of RAM, although 2 GB are recommended, and at least 15 GB of space to install it, although ideally 20 GB. And I will install from one of the many mirrors we have down here. Best to pick one close to you in the world. I'm in the UK, I will click the University of Kent mirror service to download it, and I'll click save here to save that image, to download it, and it'll take a little bit of time because it's a 1.8 GB file, but when it's finished you'll end up with a file on your machine, as I've got here, our Linux Mint 19 ISO file. And this now needs to be written to either a DVD or to a USB drive to install on a computer, and I'm here going to write it to a USB drive, and you need a USB drive of at least 4 GB capacity, and I'm going to write the image to the drive using this software here, which is called Etcher. And if you haven't got Etcher, just go to the web, go to etcher.io, and you can download a version of Etcher here for your machine. It'll default to the one you want, but you can pick lots of other versions as well. So anyway, I've got Etcher here on the machine, so I can just select the image. There it is, our Linux Mint 19 image. We'll select that. It's already picked up the USB drive I've got inserted. This happens to be a 16 GB drive, but as I say, anything 4 GB plus will do. And I can now just click on Flash. And Windows will check if we really want to do this. Yes, we do. I'll click on yes, and Etcher will now get on writing Linux Mint 19 to the Flash drive. And there we are, it's finished. So we now have a bootable USB drive with Linux Mint 19 on it. So we now just need to take that drive and to insert it into the PC on which we want to install Linux Mint 19 and boot that machine up. And by the magic of filmmaking, here we are booting up from that USB drive. And it's worth pointing out, on your own PC you may have to go into the BIOS by pressing a key at startup, probably a function key or a delete key. You might have to set in the BIOS for your machine to boot from USB. And it's also worth pointing out you might see a slightly different sequence of events as the machine will boot up, but if you just let things run through, you'll end up on a Linux Mint desktop as I am here. Now, at this stage we haven't installed Linux Mint, we've just booted from what's called Live Media, the bootable USB drive we've created. And you could at this point try out Linux Mint 19 just by using the Live Media drive. But we actually want to install it, so I'll go over to Install Linux Mint and click on that. We need to set language and keyboard layout, and then it'll say install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, flash, etc. Make sure you tick that and continue. Next, we'll come to the screen here, and this will pick up any existing operating systems on your computer. So here, for example, it's picked up the fact there's already Linux Mint 18 on this machine, or it could, for example, on many machines pick up you've got Windows there already. So you could choose to install the new operating system alongside the old one. Here I'm going to, though, go for the second option, erase disk and install Linux Mint. This, to be absolutely clear, will take everything off your current computer, get rid of your operating system, and put the new operating system onto it. That gives you a clean install, but don't do this on a computer with, say, Windows on it if you don't want to get rid of Windows. And of course it checks that I'm really sure I want to delete what's on my machine. I do. I'll continue. It'll check things like time zones, all this sort of stuff. We now have to pick a username and a computer's name. I'm going to give it my name. It's picked up a computer name. I need to pick a username. I'm going to pick, say, that, and a fairly straightforward password here, which it thinks is fair. I'm going to set it to log in automatically, which I'm going to find a bit easier. And I do want to point out here, we're setting up a local account on this machine. We are not here creating an account with Linux Mint online. Linux Mint is very different to, for example, if you install Windows. If you've gone to a Windows install recently, it asks you lots of questions about all the data it wants to share with the world. None of that happens with Linux Mint. This is simply a local account to log on to this particular machine. So we'll click on continue. And there we are, it's finished. So all we've got to do now is to press restart now, and the machine will tell us to remove our USB drive, press enter, and we can boot properly into Linux Mint 19. So here we are booting into Linux Mint 19 on the machine with the operating system fully installed. And I should say this is my second boot because I have gone in and made a few changes to things like font sizes so you can see everything a bit better on the screen. And that in fact has messed up their lovely welcome screen now, but there we are. If you want, you can see this on boot. I don't think I'll show that on boot after now, so I'll just close that down. Now, just to give you a basic idea what's going on, if you are a Windows user, this should be fairly familiar to you, because we've got down here what they call a panel, what would be a taskbar in Windows, and we've got a menu up here, which is a very nice menu. I like the look of the menu in Linux Mint. Everything is grouped into sensible categories: accessories, graphics, internet, office, etc. It's not like in, say, Windows 10 where everything is just alphabetical. It's a much more sensible install. I should also say, as I've inferred already, you can customize this a great deal, far more than you can customize in Windows. If you want to change the panel at the bottom, you can just go and right click down there and do the panel settings. And as I've implied already, I've made the panel height greater. We can make the panel a lot smaller, but I like to have it nice and big so we can see it. And I've also gone in and made a few changes to fonts. So if we look at, say, preferences here and go into fonts, which is there, you will see that in Linux Mint, we've got control of all the individual desktop items, something we haven't had in Windows for a long time, and we've also got text scaling as well. You can also here change the desktop background. Just right click as you would in Windows. We can change the desktop background. It couldn't be clearer, could it? There's lots of cool ones included. I particularly like this one, so I'm going to go with that for now because I think that's even more exciting. That's a really wacky background, isn't it? I really like that. Now, you can't have missed the fact there's a little message up here which says running in software rendering mode. There's something wrong with our drivers for graphics, and it's always worth, when you've installed version of Linux Mint, to go into the menu and go into administration and go to a driver manager, and this will show us drivers being used. This will ask us for our password, which we set up during the install. And here we are, and as you can see, it's not currently using the NVIDIA driver, which I need because I've got an NVIDIA GeForce 1030 here. It's actually detected that. So if we actually select the correct driver and apply changes, and there we are, we've now got the right graphics drivers installed, but once again, we need to restart our computer. So, the system is now rebooted, and there's a couple more things of housekeeping we should really do before we start using this machine properly. And the first of these involves something called Timeshift. And this was introduced in Linux Mint 18.3, but has become far more prominent in Linux Mint 19. So what is Timeshift? Well, basically it's a function that creates what they call snapshots of your computer, a bit like restore points in Windows, so that if you have problems with a software install or an update, you can shift your machine back in time and get out of trouble. So when you get a new copy of Linux Mint 19 installed, you should really activate Timeshift. To do that, we'll go into the menu, we'll go into administration, and down here we'll find Timeshift, there it is, and it'll ask for our password. And here we are, the wizard for Timeshift has come up. And by default, it'll select the rsync option. You should stick with that unless you've got really good reasons not to, and select next. And then I think we'll have a bit more space. Again, my sizing so you can see things has made things slightly tricky, but there we are. And basically, you'll have to pick here the drive you want to keep your snapshots on. And there's only one drive we can use here, so we'll keep the default because it's the only option we have, and we'll go to next. And we now need to decide how frequently we're going to take snapshots. I think daily is sensible, and we'll click on next again. And there we are. I think it's okay. We will be able to roll our system back if we need to. So I'll click finish on that. And Timeshift is now active on this computer. Now, Closely associated with Timeshift in Linux Mint 19 is the Update Manager. And you can access this in various ways. You can go to the menu in Administration and you'll find, there we are, Update Manager is down there. But you can also see an icon for it on the panel by default. And you see at the moment it's got a little blue colouring to it. That means that an update is available, as you can see there from the pop-up. If we go there into the Update Manager that way, you'll see what update is available. And I could here just click on Install Updates. I'll show you that. I'll click on Install Updates. It'll ask for my password in a second. There we are. And whilst it's getting on with that, it's worth pointing out that in the past, Linux Mint was very conservative in the way it suggested to apply updates. And that conservatism has changed. It's now much more likely to recommend updates because it's got Timeshift running on the machine. And we can see that if we just let this thing finish off. There we are, it's finished off. You can see the system's now up to date and the icon down here is now showing a little tick. That's what it'll look like if your system is up to date. But if we go into Edit and Preferences, we can see here for a start that snapshot is clearly an important part of this. It says show up warning if system snapshots are not set up. They are. But if we look at levels, you'll see here now it's got selected to do all levels of update will be actually shown and selected because it knows it can go back to Timeshift to get things back if there's a problem. So these days you can go in and do lots of setting changes yourself in the Update Manager, but to be honest, if you're new to Linux and you just want the system to get on with do things by itself automatically, it's now very good at doing that. And you've therefore got two choices. You can leave things so that you wait and see the icon down here not being a green tick and apply updates yourself, or you can go into Auto Upgrade and make sure here, have you got system snapshots set up in Timeshift? Yes, we have. And we could then apply updates automatically. And I think for many people, that's a good thing to do. But it is nice to know you can, if you want, occasionally turn off the automatic updates so you don't have them interrupting you under a particularly important piece of work. But anyway, I will apply that. And now our Update Manager is going to be properly set up. Again, we need the password. But effectively now on this machine, I can forget about updates. The system will take care of them all by itself. Right, having been good and done all the housekeeping you should do when you get a new copy of your operating system installed, let's turn our attention to software. And as you may remember, if you look down in the menu here, there's a lot of software installed by default in Linux Mint 19. You've got, for example, the GNU image manipulation program, GIMP, which is basically a Photoshop alternative. You've got under Internet things like the Firefox web browser, Thunderbird email, and under Office you've got LibreOffice Writer with its word processor, spreadsheet, etc. And if you want to, you can add shortcuts to these to either the desktop or the panel. If you just right click here, we could say add to panel, and you'll see we've got that down there. And let's add, say, Firefox, I don't know, to the desktop. There we are. It'll go up there. So we've added those on, and therefore you can work with things exactly as you would in Windows. Now, having said that, of course, you might want to add other software to the stuff that isn't currently installed. And to do that, you go to the Software Manager. The Software Manager is there. Look, little green and white icon. We click on that. It'll come up. And here we are. It shows you some editor's picks. You might want Dropbox, Minecraft, all these other popular things. Or you can search for things by name. Or you can use the categories. So, for example, if I look at, say, games there's lots of Linux games there. If you want to board games, first-person shooters, all sorts of things are there. And we've got, say, Internet here, where we could have, for example, the Chromium browser. So if we want to install something from here, we just have to select it. We'll select Chromium browser, and we'll click on Install. And the thing I'm hopefully showing you here, oh yes, we have to enter our password again, and authenticate. But the thing I'm trying to show you is that to install software on a modern version of Linux, something like Linux Mint 19, is very straightforward. There it are, it's all done. We could launch it from here. I'm not going to. I always like to launch things by going down to the menu. It just makes me feel they're really there. Look under Internet, we now have the Chromium browser, and let's add that to the panel down there. And there it is, look. And I'm going to launch it from down there. I'm just in a wild mood today. And there we are, there's the Chromium browser. And let's go to explainingcomputers.com. It picked it by default. That's jolly clever, isn't it? And there we are. You can get to websites. You can check out quantum computing, couldn't you? All that excitement from a few weeks ago on the channel, if you wanted to do that. Now, here I am back again to both demonstrate and fix a problem that some Windows users have when they come across to Linux. And to do this, I'm going to run up OpenOffice Writer with a nice little icon I put down there for that purpose. And I'm going to load in a document, recent document. There it is. It's called a sample Word doc. And there's a document. You're probably thinking that looks absolutely fine. And it does until we compare it to what it looked like in Word. If we look here, and you'll see in Word it looked different. And if we come back to Linux, the reason is we haven't got the same fonts installed on the system. So what can we do about that? Well, let's close that down. And we could go to the software manager there, and we could search for facility to install fonts, and some people do that. It doesn't always work though, to be honest. And so I'm going to do a terrible thing here, at least some people say it's a terrible thing. I'm going to use the terminal. And the terminal can be scary, and I think people when they come across Linux go, oh dear, you have to type commands into a terminal to make things happen. Isn't that awful? My view is once you start using Linux, you have to do a little bit of work with a terminal now and then. So I want to do something in this video, use the terminal, and this is going to be it. And what we're going to do is to install some standard Windows fonts in what I think is the simplest way to do it. Now, the first thing we're going to do is to run a command called sudo apt and update. Now, all that does, if I just press enter as it goes through and enter my password to prove it, all this does is checks that Linux Mint 19 knows where to find all the packages we want to install a bit later on. Let's move that up the screen just in case you can't see that on the bottom now. And now we're going to enter the command to actually install the font, which is going to be sudo. Sudo, by the way, just tells the machine to execute a command as the administrator, because this is something that actually alters the system. And it's going to be apt install, and it's going to be mstt core fonts. And if I got that right, press enter. Looks like I have. Do we wish to continue? Yes, we do. Let that run through. And now I just need to scroll down to the bottom here to accept the license terms. And OK, there we are. Got to OK eventually. Text-based system. We must accept the license terms. Yes, we'll do that. OK again. Do we accept the license terms? Yes. And there we are. In theory, it's finished. And we can prove if this has worked or not very easily. We'll get rid of this and we'll go back into a LibreOffice Writer. This is a test, isn't it? Live demonstration of something working from the terminal. And we'll go across to our sample document. And yes, it now looks like it should look, because we've got fonts like Comic Sans and Verdana and Arial installed on this system. So if you're a Windows user bringing across a lot of documents to a Linux system, it's very important to install these core Windows fonts. Right, I thought I'd close up saying a bit about storage under Linux Mint 19, how drives are handled, because if you're coming across some Windows, you'll discover you've no longer got lettered drives. You've no longer got, for example, a C drive. And to actually help us through this explanation, I've added 2 more drives onto this system. One is called Transcend, that is a USB flash drive I've plugged in. One is called Video, that is a hard drive I've connected into the system. And as you will see from this, by default, Linux Mint 19 will give you an icon on the desktop for every mounted volume. And there's also a couple of icons which also link to its file manager, which is called Nemo, which are computer and home. And if we click on home, you'll see it shows you initially a list of all those folders for you as a user where it expects you to store your files. So you'll see, for example, there's a folder here called Documents, which contains the sample document we had earlier, music, pictures, video, etc. If you want to access other drives, you can see down here we've got our Transcend flash drive. There it is with the files in that. And here is video, which is the extra hard drive I've added onto the system. You might be wondering, what does it physically call these if you're curious? And you can see here from the pop-up, this drive is called SDB1. And to explain that, basically what happens in Linux is that every physical drive on the system is labelled SDA, SDB, SDC, etc. And then the number on the end indicates for the particular volume the partition it is on the drive. So here, video is the second drive on the system and it's got one partition, therefore SDB1 is the volume we can see there. Same for Transcend, that is SDC1, that's the one partition on that drive. If you want to actually see everything on the system, you can just nip to the terminal. And I'll do that for my sins for a second time in this video. If I type df-h, it'll show us here a list of all the file systems on this computer, which will obviously include all the physical drives. So here, for example, SDA1, that is the main hard drive on this system, the first partition on it where we've got the operating system installed. SDB1 is the first only partition on the drive called Video, and SDC1 is the first only partition on the drive called Transcend. You can also quite usefully go to Menu and Administration and Disk Usage Analyzer, and one of the things that does is also to list all the physical drives on the system. Now, Having shown you that, I will just take you into the icon here called Computer, which is just another view of an email file manager, and this shows you all the physical drives on the system again. And here if we click on File System is the first volume, SDA1 as we now know it's called. And there if we look at that, you'll see there's lots of folders, and these contain all the places that the system stores all the operating system files, programs, etc. And there's also a directory here called Home, and Home is, if we click on that, you will see it's got a folder directory for each user. There I'm CJB, and inside that where it stores all the particular folders where you are actually storing your files. So there we are. There's a very quick overview of drives and how you navigate them in Linux Mint 19. It's a bit different to what you would do in Windows, but you'll get used to it in time. Linux Mint 19 is a very polished operating system that will serve many people very well indeed, and which is currently my Linux install of choice. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.